Ellen Wermter is a family nurse practitioner and diplomat in behavioral sleep medicine. She's a dedicated sleep professional who actively treats patients full-time in Charlottesville, neurology, and sleep medicine in Virginia. Ellen offers both CBT for insomnia and hypersomnia. In addition to her clinical work, she's a regular contributor for Better Sleep Council, as well as other media outlets about the science of sleep and healthy rest. Ellen enjoys sharing her expertise in the sleep field through guest lecturing at universities and other speaking engagements. She is a member of the Medical Advisory Board for Narcolepsy Network. And on a personal note, I just want to say that Ellen has been one of my favorite people to collaborate with in the community. I've had a chance to know her and collaborate with her on a few research projects and also get to know her on the online social media. And she truly is phenomenal. She keeps it together at the Charlottesville Neurology and helps make that place a true success. And so it's my honor to introduce you, Ellen, and I will let you take it from here.
Thank you so much for that really nice introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here tonight. It's a pleasure, truly a pleasure. And tonight we're going to talk about nutritional considerations for central disorders of hypersomnolence. My disclaimer is that the D in my DBSM is not for a dietitian. So just to be clear, my nutritional training comes from my medical professional training, my RN and my NP. We get lots of nutritional training through that, but I'm not a registered dietitian or nutrition expert in any sense of the word. So I just want to throw that out there so that you understand my background and where I'm coming from. But I do work with people with hypersomnolence on a daily basis and have some things to share with you tonight. I will also say that even though hypersomnolence is what brings everybody together in this format, each one of you is a unique individual with all your own health challenges. So, there may be other conditions that you're dealing with on top of your hypersomnia diagnosis. And so in those cases, it might be more appropriate for you to be following, a diet for your heart health or your kidney or your blood sugar stabilization or something like that. So as always, work with your local medical professional that you see on a regular basis when you're making decisions about your nutrition and your diet, and any resources that they may be able to direct you to, a dietitian in your area that will more personalize and make these diet considerations specific to you and not just your hypersomnia, but to all of your whole body, everything that's going on. All right, so good news, bad news. Bad news is that I can't come to you tonight and say, hey, there's a magic plan, and if you just follow this plan perfectly, your symptoms are going to be better, your management is going to be better, your therapy is going to be better. The good news is, though, that there may be some dietary considerations that might make a difference for you. So we're going to talk about some of those tonight, look specifically at a few studies that have come out just this year, and give you some things to think about, some food for thought, so to speak, as you're making these decisions. The other piece of advice I would give is if you're thinking about dietary changes that you might want to make, one thing to think about is the timing of when you want to do that. So I would recommend that if you're going to try out anything, that you would wait until things are pretty stable in your life. Meaning if you're starting a new medication, if you're starting a new job, if things are a little tumultuous, it's probably not the timing to do a bunch of experimentation with, oh, if I change my diet, is it going to help this? Because there's too many other variables. So try to pick a time if you want to experiment with a different type of diet or add some things in that you've never done before, and you want to see if it's making a difference for you. Try to pick a time when it's not a tumultuous time, there's not a lot of changes, and you can really sort of zero in on whether the variable of your nutrition could be making things better or worse for you. And a good way to sort of keep track of that would be either journaling, just straight up, how do I feel, or creating your own sort of evaluation scale, so that you can see, well, this week I focused on these things And did my scale go even better or worse? You know, you can go pretty simple with your scale. You don't have to get too crazy with it, but it's nice to have something written down on paper for you to keep track of, because it's really hard when you're making some of these changes to, you know, is it helping? Is it not? And if you're keeping track of it, that can be a helpful thing. Okay. So what did I start with here? Okay, microbiome. We're starting with microbiome because it's a pretty huge topic. The exciting thing is there's tons more research coming out constantly about this. And we know it's important. So we know that when we're forming in the womb, our gut and our brain come from the same neural tube. So there is actually hardwiring of the gut and the brain. It's called the gut-brain axis. And so there's this connection there that's pretty established, and we know that they influence one another. We also know that within our gut, there are a multitude of thriving microorganisms. I know some people might feel like, oh, get a little squirmy about the thought of that, but they're not really an extension of who you are. They're actually part of who you are. It's a symbiotic relationship, and they really impact and influence our thoughts and our behaviors and our neurotransmitters and lots of things that they do for us. A few of the jobs specifically are they help you to digest your food, they get rid of harmful bacteria, they regulate your immune system, and the goal is to keep the microbiome balanced with good diversity. So you don't want overgrowth of certain types of bacteria. You want to keep it sort of balanced with a diversity of bacteria. When an overgrowth happens, that can cause symptoms that are telling you that something's imbalanced there. And those can often be GI upset symptoms like bloating, dyspepsia, diarrhea, things like that. And that it can also interfere with your absorption of nutrients. It can change the permeability of your intestinal wall, and that can pave the way for inflammation, for autoimmune disease, and it can weaken your immune system. It can also negatively affect your mood and your energy level. So most of your serotonin, which we know is a neurotransmitter that's helps to regulate our mood, is made in your gut. So we're really trying to keep a healthy balance here. I put this book up here because this isn't a book that's specific to hypersomnia. It's not even specific to the human race, but it is a book if you are very science oriented and you want to learn more about the microbiome. This is a fabulous science book that really talks about how our initial microbiome is established and the things that impact it, but even on a grander scale than just human life. And it's what got me interested more in this. And when I read it, it's been out for 6 or 7 years now, I think. When I read it, I thought the future is coming where they're going to be applying these principles in the health field, and it's already here. And I'm going to show you 3 studies that were done very, very recently. So this one came out this month, March of 2024, in Sleep. And this was a study in specifically narcolepsy type 1 patients. And what they did was they did an analysis of the gut microbiota. And so basically, when we talk about the different types of bacteria that live in the gut, they come from different families. And they oftentimes will call those microbial taxa, and that just means like a different family of microorganisms. So one example of that might be lactobacillus. That's a pretty common one, but there are lots and lots of them, and some of them are more rare than others. So what they wanted to see is in patients that have type 1 narcolepsy, and they looked at their microbiota, and they were able to identify that there were certain classes, certain families where there were more of those. And if there were more of those, it would lower the chance. And then others where if it were more of those, it would elevate the chance. And then on the flip side, they saw that when a person had narcolepsy type 1, they would often have a lower number of certain groups of bacteria. And then they would have other groups of bacteria that tended to be more overgrown or more present than in the like matched controls. So we're talking about compared to a normal control. So their conclusion was that there was robust evidence for a bidirectional link between particular families of microbes and this condition of type 1 narcolepsy. And it also says this underscores the significance of the microbiota gut-brain axis in the pathological process of narcolepsy type 1. So brand new research that's just coming out. This one is specific to type 1, but let's look at a couple other ones. They did one in August of last year that came out in this I got from Science Daily, but it was through the King's College of London. And what they looked at in this specific study was irregular sleep patterns. So particularly, they were looking at social jet lag, people who weren't keeping a regular schedule of sleep. And they found that even just a 90-minute difference in the timing of the midpoint of sleep was associated with differences in the gut microbiome composition. So what they saw was they saw 6 species of microbiota that were more abundant in the irregular sleepers, and 3 of those 6 species were species that have unfavorable associations with health, that are associated with either poor diet quality, indicators of obesity, and cardiometabolic health. And markers of those in your blood relate to higher levels of inflammation. So basically, the question sort of there is, when you're an irregular sleeper, does that mean it's harder for you to choose make certain dietary choices that then would promote good gut health? Or is it that your gut health is impacting the regularity of your sleep? And we do think, again, that there's this bidirectional sort of influence going in both ways. And then the last study I'll get into, and we're going to do questions at the end. And I will just tell you right up front, if you want to get into the nitty gritty with these studies with me, I'm not going to be able to tell you like all the little tiny details. These are just sort of a general review. I can give you the references for you to read, but they really are in depth the way that they set these up. And so if you're asking me a very specific question about one of these studies, I probably am not going to be able to answer it, but hopefully I'm doing a decent job summarizing it. And if you want more information, certainly I can provide the references for you to go and read exactly how they did it. But it gets kind of complicated, especially in this one, because this is a 2-sample Mendelian randomization study. So very cool study here on the causal effects of gut microbiota on sleep-related phenotypes. So basically what they did is they took a global database of health information. They pulled out some sleep-related traits, and then they looked at the intestinal microbiome within those sleep-related traits. And what they found was that in 7 of those sleep-related traits that they looked at, there was a relationship between an overgrowth or sort of some missing ones, some ones that we would expect to be there that weren't, of certain bacteria with these certain sleep disorders. So I'm going to show you in the next slide. On the right, this is very busy, don't read the analysis yet, but on the right, you see the chart, and at the bottom are the different sleep characteristics that they looked at. So daytime napping, daytime sleepiness adjusted for BMI, insomnia, sleep duration, long sleep duration, short sleep duration, chronotype, and binary chronotype. Those were the sleep-related traits that they looked at. And then on the right hand, the column, those are all the different families of microbiota that they looked at. And so they're looking at which ones are more prevalent in each of these and which ones are sort of missing that we would expect to be there. The analysis is only for insomnia, and I picked insomnia for a reason. I picked insomnia because that's not why anyone really is here. You're here for hypersomnia. I didn't want you to take the daytime sleepiness data and start writing down all of those families and then trying to find them and put them in your diet. And the reason for that is that we're not really there yet, and you can't just add in certain families of microbiota. If you did that, if we could do that, we'd already be doing it. But the problem is it matters what it's going into. So it matters what the starting point is with your individual family of bugs that you got already going. So because we don't know what's in there now and which families have set up shop there, that's why adding it isn't necessarily the best way to go about it yet. So what will happen eventually, we hope, is that there will be some way for us to evaluate the starting point. And then if we know that certain families would help with a certain symptom, then maybe we do try to enhance that. But because of the way certain things fight it out for dominance within the gut microbiota, it's not just like a simple math formula, like we need more than this, more of this, let's put it in. But you can see in the insomnia group, just to give you an idea of what the analysis would look like, is so in this particular one, what they found is when people had an abundance of Odorobacter and Oscillobacter, that decreased their risk of insomnia. By contrast, these other 5 bacterial taxa, if they were present, it actually increased the risk of insomnia. And I'm not going to read those because I'm going to butcher them. They're really hard to read. But what is the takeaway here? So let's talk about what the takeaway is. Basically, the results of the study emphasize the potential of personalized gut-based treatments to improve sleep, and they underline the importance of maintaining a healthy balance of gut bacteria for better sleep and well-being. So we're definitely seeing a connection between sleep and your microbiome and certain overgrowth of certain families in certain sleep-related traits. So the takeaway here is microbiome matters. The gut and brain, we see that hardwiring, we know that's there. That studies do show that there's more dysbiosis, or there's different overgrowth of certain bacteria in people with narcolepsy, and that applies to the study we talked about, but also there are several other studies that support that going back further. I couldn't find any specific to IH, but for that particular thing, but what we're seeing is that there are imbalances with sleep-related traits. And then be on the lookout for that personalized option. We're not there yet, but what can you do in the meantime? Basically, you want to do the things that support support a healthy microbiome. So one of the things you can do is to limit high sugar foods, because that can cause overgrowth of, I don't like it really when they call it bad bacteria, because to me, it's like they're all just trying to like do their thing, but certain ones create more unhealthy symptoms. And when you get an overgrowth of those, then you might have the physical symptoms, and it might prevent your body from being able to function, the way optimally, the way we want it to. Diversity is good in general with diet. So if you've ever heard eat the rainbow, it just means like, some green leafies, but then some carrots, because there are different vitamins and minerals in orange foods than there are in green foods. And then blueberries, that color has a different set of nutrients and vitamins as well. So you're trying to increase the diversity of the different types of microbia that you're going to be exposed to. High fiber foods also, they stimulate growth of the good bacteria, and then plants are almost always a good bet because they are high in fiber, and they also increase the good bacteria, help fight the bad bacteria, they lower inflammation. And then the prebiotics, probiotics. So those are 2 different categories. Prebiotics are things, lots of veggies and high fiber foods, but some examples would be also like the aromatics, like onions and garlic, and oats is a prebiotic too. So these are foods that help to set you up for a good promote the growth of the healthy bacteria. And then the probiotics are actually the fermented foods. So there's already full of live probiotics. So that lactobacilli that I was talking about earlier that you find in yogurts or kefir, and a lot of those like kimchi and sauerkraut, miso, tempeh, sourdough, anything fermented is going to be full of those probiotics. And then there are non-dietary ways to support your microbiome as well, because your behaviors influence your nutrition as well. And those are things like exercise, and then limiting alcohol, and trying to do what you can to manage your stress, because when you're in a state of stress, it changes how your nutrition can work for you as well. And it changes the state of the microbiome and what's going to thrive and what's not going to thrive. So I think that about covers the microbiome. So we're going to move on to a couple of additional considerations that you might want to think about. Let's see, what do I have here? Keto. So this is a question I get a lot from my patients, and honestly, I learn more from my patients than I do from any study, but many of them would come and say, I read on this hypersomnia message board that keto might help. What do you think? So let's talk about it. Basically, what is keto? A keto diet is a very low carb, typically a higher fat diet that over time induces a metabolic state called ketosis. It takes a little while to get into that ketosis state, but once you get into that state with that sustained low carb diet, your body, instead of burning glucose for energy, will burn fat for energy. And there are some studies and some anecdotal evidence that it does help certain people with hypersomnia to feel better, but it's not enough to give a blanket recommendation for everybody with hypersomnia. And there also are some limitations or risks because it is a more dramatic change to your diet and you are really limiting certain things. This is definitely one where you want to talk to your primary care clinician or a dietitian before making this more of a dramatic change like this, because there are risks to this type of diet. There usually can be, as long as look, you have to drink a lot of water when you're doing this, or there are certain things that can kind of help with that. You have to watch out for constipation. So there are, things that you have to consider with it, and it may not be right for everybody. But for some people, they really feel like this lower carb option helps them to have more sustained alertness and awakeness, being more awake throughout the day. So something to think about. Can't make a blanket recommendation. Would recommend, because it is a little bit more of an extreme diet, that you would talk to somebody before you try it. But it may be something that benefits you. So you should know that it is something that there is some anecdotal and some studies that have been done for it. Okay. What about the food coma, sort of the situation where you have a meal and then you feel sleepy after? So we may not, certainly with diet, we're not going to be able to make all your sleepiness go away all of the time. But if you are a person who is susceptible to the post-meal slump, if you are feeling like, look, every time I eat, I'm kind of, for an hour after or 2 hours after, I feel really like my sleepiness is a lot worse, then this is a consideration that you might want to take in hand. And so it's basically trying to keep a more stable glycemic index, which is basically your blood sugar. Usually when you eat, you get an influx of your blood sugar, but then when the insulin is released to deal with that, you get a crash. So you get a low blood sugar. And when you get that, that's when you're going to have that sleepy symptom. So things that can help that are sort of more low carb. And maybe that's one reason that keto works for some people, is that there is more protein built into that diet and fewer carbohydrates. But low carb in general, if you have a really high carbohydrate meal, you're going to have more of a really quick rise in your blood sugar, followed by a really quick crash in the blood sugar, and that's when you're going to have those sleepy symptoms. If you're doing some carbs, you can offset them. One trick is to offset them with some protein, so that when you have that spike and then it starts to crash, the protein is there to kind of catch it and to sustain it a little bit longer, so you're not getting as much of a variation. Foods that are high in fiber will slow that down, so it actually it cleans the GI tract out, but it also slows the progression so that you can stabilize your blood sugar a little bit better too with the fiber. Avoiding larger meals, just that huge bolus of your body having to do all that digestion and then all the blood going there to do that work, and then that leaving you with not a lot left. And then avoiding foods that cause inflammation, red meat, sugary sweets, whatever it is for you, that might cause inflammation, or intolerances. In general, if you don't do well with gluten, then, you're going to want to try to avoid that as much as you can, to help even out your day, and for your body not to have that additional sort of taxing, job to do. Medications, I can't skip this because our medications that we use for hypersomnia, they do have an impact on your body, and in particular, they can impact appetite, and they can also cause some GI side effects. So nauseousness, stomach upset, those types of things. So they're always a consideration. Is it from the medication? How mild is the side effect? Is it going to be one that sticks around, or is it going to be transient? Because there are some that you might have initially that even out over time. And then if you're on a medication with higher sodium, sort of maybe potentially needing to adjust your diet so that it's lower sodium to offset, the sodium that you're getting in your medications. So these are considerations too when you're thinking about managing your condition with, and also trying to balance it with what you get from your pharmaceuticals. And the last thing, I only have one more thing, I promise, is timing. And I put this in here because with sleep-wake disorders, there is a lot of instability. And so primarily underlying things, there's more instability. So anything that you can do to build some scaffolding for your circadian rhythm to kind of cling to and hold on to and to support your circadian rhythm are helpful. And one of the inputs into your circadian system is your meal times. So what time you're eating every day. And so just like you want to keep a regular sleep schedule, a regular exercise schedule, regular exposure to light, you also want to try to keep your meals as regular as possible, because that's going to help your brain predict what's coming next. And it's going to be a strong signal to your circadian rhythm about what time it is and what's coming next in your day. So I'm not here to tell you you need to do intermittent fasting, or you need to never eat past 8 p.m. What I'm here to tell you is you need to experiment with timing of your eating. And once you find something that works well for you, you need to try to keep it consistent. I mean, sometimes I'll ask patients, what time do you eat breakfast? And it's all over the place, and your brain and your stomach don't really like that. Your stomach actually, if you do eat on a regular schedule, it will start making digestive juices to prepare to accept the meal. And when it's not doing that because it doesn't know when's coming, it does impair your ability to sort of digest and absorb. And so you might have actually more symptoms if your stomach's not expecting food at that time. So it's really important to try to come up with a schedule that works for you and to try to stick to it, because any structure and scaffolding that you can provide to sort of stabilize your circadian rhythm, to stabilize your sleep wake, is going to benefit you in the long run. So that's all I have. Hopefully I left plenty of time for some questions. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
Yeah. So, one of the things too, I just want to point out, because I always love applauding healthcare professionals when they say something like this, but you made a statement that you learn more from your patients than from any research study. And I just want to say that's a credit to you and how you approach your practice, because I think that's such an important statement that there's so much value in the lived experience, and certainly appreciate listening to what we have to say. Again, I think it's simple but often overlooked. So thank you for that. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you would like to raise your hand, that would be great. If you want to ask, verbalize your question. I know we've got some questions. I want to also just remind everyone that some questions can be very specific, so try to keep them broad application. Ellen can't necessarily answer specific questions about everybody's dietary approaches. And as she so eloquently put it, it's nuanced. So any questions, I know that you guys have some. So please feel free to jump in.
And I didn't say this specifically in the presentation, but processed foods in general too are typically not really great at supporting a healthy microbiome. They have, things in them or things that are taken out of them. So sort of as cleanly as you can eat, as far as, things that grow in the ground that don't get a lot of processing added to them, those are probably going to support a much better, healthier microbiome than, something that has a list of ingredients that's 30 things long.
Yeah, that's a great point. So here's a great question. How can you find out if you have a healthy microbiome? I want to leave that to you. I know that there is some testing to do, but I'd love to hear
Yeah,
kind
I
of your
don't have any
perspective.
validation data on certain types of testing. I think that that's going to be an evolving part of the field, and we're definitely going to see more and more. And I know that there are some, I've seen them, I think even at Target, but I couldn't tell you, is that a good one? Are you going to get good information? That sort of thing. I would be on the lookout for that though, and keep up with, how you can find out. But basically what you're looking for are, do you have any of those symptoms of an unhealthy microbiome? That would be a way. If you do, then it's something that I would say, maybe if you have time to experiment with kind of, some of the, like, maybe I'm gonna make a goal to add in, a kombucha a day, or, something fermented, or something, a yogurt, if you're not a yogurt eater, then you could do an experiment and see if you're having some of the symptoms of a healthy microbiome that's not maybe as balanced as you'd like. And then you tried some of the, to up your game on some of the, let me put 5 more plants a week in my diet, or different colors, or, some way that you could experiment with making a change, and then you can kind of see if you see a positive change or not, or if you see a reduction in the negative symptoms, like the upset stomach, or the indigestion, or those types of things.
Yeah, I really liked what you said there about like a number, to like making small changes, like tweak small things, see if you have any sort of impact. We're not talking about, you know, turning up your entire approach, but like make some small changes and see if there's improvements, and really listen to what your body says. This is a great question from Cheryl. And I know it's applicable because of, circadian dysrhythmia associated with IH as well. But any suggestions on how to get your body to want to eat when you tend to have a limited appetite? She references when you're because your appetite may be messed up because of your sleep pattern, and also I know medication. So any
Yeah.
question there, or any feedback there for Cheryl's question?
Yes, I do. I do have this discussion with my patients, because certain medications I'll see a really, some weight loss that will normally stabilize, but sometimes it doesn't. And usually what has happened is that they're having a loss of appetite. And with that loss of appetite, they'll say, I don't feel hungry. Like, I won't even realize that I haven't eaten until like 4 in the afternoon. And then I'll say, oh, I haven't even had anything to eat yet. But if that happens enough days in a row, what you're getting is that timing piece with the not having the gastric juices to do the digestion. Because if it's enough days in a row, then your brain just doesn't know that it's supposed to be ready to accept food at that time. And then that makes you feel more nauseous. You don't really like to eat. So my recommendation there is to really pay attention to the timing of your meals, and pick some times and put an alarm in your phone. 10 o'clock, I'm going to have a cheese stick, or 10 o'clock, I'm going to have whatever it is that's kind of easy. Maybe you don't have to prepare it, or maybe you've prepared it ahead, but something that, or maybe just something that you tolerate well. It doesn't even have to be the best thing for your microbiome to start with, just something that your body can accept. And then you can work on making it, a healthier choice. But what you want to do is get used to eating at that same time every day, just even if you start small, because sometimes that's what it takes, is you just have to start getting those juices flowing at the same time each day. And then you can build, to, a bigger meal or a bigger snack, or something that's maybe you wouldn't be able to digest, when you first start, something that's a little, spicier or more interesting than a saltine cracker, or whatever it is that you decide you can tolerate at first. I always use cheese stick because they're pretty bland and mild, but they have protein, and your body's doing some work to digest that. So just pick something that you think your body will tolerate, something small. Set alarms on your phone. I need to eat something small at 10. I need to have something at 1. I need to have something at 4, or whatever your little schedule is, and then go from there, build it from there.
That's a great suggestion, and I think I have to introduce food at specific times. And sometimes you're right. Like if I tease the appetite a little bit, it's like all of a sudden that sets the system off, and it's like, okay, actually I am a little bit hungrier than what I realized. And I do like the nutrient dense or the caloric dense food, like a cheese stick that has some fat that should help hit the diet, hit your appetite a little bit, and kind of keep you
I have
going.
the opposite problem. Like when I'm really, really hungry, like I know I need to cook dinner, but I can't really wait to eat the dinner, so I'm like snacking while I'm making dinner. So I'm
Mhm.
always looking for foods that will sort of satisfy that really intense hunger, so that I cannot ruin my dinner with a bunch of snacks while I'm cooking it. And I found medjool dates are good for that because they're really sweet, but they do have the fiber. And so the sugar will like really satisfy my craving for more food right away. And then I'm going to cook my dinner and I'll have my dinner. But so you really have to kind of experiment with it. And I get asked about intuitive eating, and honestly, I do feel like your body will tell you when you listen to it. And so if you have a craving for something, try it and see, did that help? I do think that it's trying to tell us kind of what we need. And I think when I noticed that the most was during my pregnancies. That's pretty common time to have those. But come to find out, oh, my iron was low. Oh, no wonder I've been craving X. It's because
Yeah.
your body's kind of telling you what you need. But in those cases where it's really hard to, you're trying to figure out what food you're going to be able to tolerate. And I would start with like what feels good, and then you can kind of alter it from there.
Yeah. There's a lot of great questions about finding nutritious food that's easier to prepare. And I think that would make for a great segue when we get to some of that breakout session too. I did want to acknowledge it. If do you have a suggestion on something that's easy to prepare? I know that not all microwave meals are created equally. There are some that have, some higher quality to them as well. But, I know reality is sometimes, when we're dragging butt, like you
Yeah.
want to go for something that's easy. Is there something that you found that you think has, that kind of bridges that ease
Yeah.
with nutritional content?
Well, I mean, for snacks, I always go for nuts and like yogurt, like little yogurt shots, or yogurt, small containers of yogurt, or cottage cheese, or even ricotta cheese. If you're not a dairy person, I'm sorry, because I love dairy, so most of my suggestions are dairy. But if you're talking about meals, I mean, I can say I love my Instapot, my crock pot, because you can sort of planning and having a plan. I know it's hard, and I hate doing it. Honestly, I would hate like Sundays, my meal planning. But if you can find a time where you do have reliably have more awakeness or alertness or energy to do your meal planning and to get things like, I know today I'm going to make this. And so it's already sort of, you've already started the hard part. You've already kind of overcome the mental block of what am I going to make? And so the planning piece, planning ahead piece is important. And then on days when you know you're not going to have gas left in the tank, that might be a day where it's a crock pot situation or, but then some people, if mornings are your bad time, crock pots are not going to be your friend, so you're
Yeah.
going to be more an air fryer kind of, something that's going to cook. The Instapot's great for that
Yeah.
because it's like a pressure cooker, so things cook faster in that. So kind of using the tools that we have, so many tools at our disposal now, gadgets for cooking, but using those to your advantage. But I think the biggest thing I would say is having the plan done, because that's the hardest part of getting the momentum. It's like starting the push of it's the momentum that's really can be the worst part.
Yeah, as a dad of three, single dad for a while now, grateful to have a partner. I think the planning out the meals purposefully was probably just is so helpful for both the the dad part, but also my mental health part. Because again, you lay out, you know what's expected, you know what you need to do, and then I can't echo enough how Instapot can save the day for making something hearty in a relatively quick amount of time, um, and even get the little man to eat it. So um, lot of great questions here. I did want to acknowledge one question back up a little bit. Janet asked a little bit about BMI, and it was one of the questions is you still one of the studies you spoke to about sense of symptom relative to BMI. Do your research find people with higher BMI struggle more with hypersomnia? Um, so just wanted to throw that out there. It's
No, not necessarily obesity and hypersomnia, but what we do see is that um that being sleepy during the day can affect your food choices, because sometimes we think, well, we need more energy, we need to be more awake, and we think that food is the thing that's going to create that, and it's not always the case. So there is a connection there, and there are some other connections with sort of certain bacterial taxa, like the families, the groups that we see. Again, it's that bidirectional. Is it the unhealthy microbiome that's driving the choices, or is it the choices that's causing the unhealthy microbiome? We don't we think it can go in both ways. But as far as people with hypersomnia, they come in all shapes and sizes. So there's not necessarily like worse symptoms based on your BMI.
I think you said bidirectional multiple times tonight, and I think that's such an important piece. There's a bidirectional relationship too with type 2 diabetes and sleep disorders. It goes, the extra weight can contribute to type 2 diabetes. And, there's been some research that shows that people with type 2 diabetes have higher levels of sleep disorders, but there's so much I think that kind of goes back and forth. And then I think it gets down to what you said, experimenting, I think is so key to find what works best for you. A lot of really good suggestions that people are offering back and forth in the chat, about how people adapt. Question here from Meryl that I think is nice. When you say at the same time every day, how much variability in timing is acceptable? 30 minutes, 60 minutes.
This isn't based on any research, but I would say within an hour. I would
Yeah,
try to keep it to within an hour. And the closer you can get to that, the better. I mean, I know I take my lunch at 1 and I start to feel hungry at like 12:55. No matter what time zone I'm in, I'm ready for that lunch. And my he takes his at noon. So whenever we're like on the weekend, he's always like dying for lunch at 11:55, and I'm like, I got another hour, like I'm not ready to eat yet. But we each can shift a little toward each other during those times, and it's not that big a deal. But I think within an hour, I mean, that's when we talk about social jet lag, it's sort of like try to keep your timing of your sleep. If you need to sleep in on the weekends or feel like that's important for some sort of catch up sleep, okay, but try to keep it within an hour. So I would go with that again, and again, as close to a typical time, the better, just because again, your body's going to really like that predictability and that stability that you're providing.
Before you go for the evening, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I think it's um, hard for a lot of people to appreciate how difficult it must be to put together this presentation because the research is still in its infancy. So thank you just for taking the time.